Everyone out there who's watching, wherever you might be. Today I'm joined by Benjamin Schott with the National Weather Service in New Orleans, and he will, in just a few moments, give you the latest update on Hurricane Ida. Dr. Joe Cantor with the Louisiana Department of Health will speak in a minute on COVID and health considerations as we prepare for and respond to this hurricane. We also have on hand today Chip Klein with the CPRA, General Keith Waddell of the Louisiana National Guard, Colonel Lamar Davis with the Louisiana State Police, and also Secretary Jack Monisset with the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, and Jim Wascom with GOSEP. And they will be available at the end of the presentation in order to take any questions that you might want to direct to them. I want to start by acknowledging that today is the one-year anniversary of Hurricane Laura. And while much progress has been made, there's still a long road of recovery left as it relates to the recovery from Hurricane Laura, particularly in southwest Louisiana. And here we are today faced with another storm setting its sights on Louisiana, this time southeast Louisiana. We have some very significant updates for you. What I can tell you is Hurricane Ida is rapidly intensifying, and the situation is changing, it seems, by the hour. We now believe that there is a strong likelihood that this will be a Category 4 hurricane at landfall. That's how quickly the storm is developing. I can tell you that I had an opportunity a short while ago to speak with the National Hurricane Center, Ken Graham, and he indicated that the storm is sort of ahead of schedule, meaning they had projected it would be at a certain strength at a certain time, and is beating those projections. And what this means is the rapid intensification is happening as was expected. It's just happening to a greater degree, or at least faster than expected. So we have a very serious situation on our hands, and it's important that everyone take advantage of all the opportunities that you have, all the time that you have to adequately prepare yourself and your family, and make sure that you stay calm and that you do those things that are required to put you and your family in the best possible position to successfully weather the storm. Hurricane Ida is presently projected to make landfall somewhere between Terrebonne and St. Mary parishes on Sunday evening. By tomorrow night, tropical storm force winds will begin to move onto the coast of Louisiana. And so the next 24 hours are very, very important. Now is the time to finish your preparations, and I want to encourage everyone to understand that by nightfall tomorrow night, you need to be where you intend to ride out the storm, and you need to be postured as you would want to be as that storm approaches you. Make sure that you're paying attention to your family, to your pets, to elderly loved ones and neighbors. Last night I was able to send a letter to President Biden requesting a pre-landfall federal emergency declaration. I'm very pleased to announce that he approved it earlier today, and we are very grateful for the fact that he approved it, and he did so very quickly. I was able to speak to the president just a few moments ago, and I will tell you, I was able to thank him personally, but this declaration is a key part of us being able to respond to Hurricane Ida and really to prepare in advance of landfall. Yesterday, as you all probably know, I also issued a state of emergency declaration for the state of Louisiana. And so both my declaration and the federal declaration issued by the president are for the entire state of Louisiana. As it happens, yesterday I was in Lake Charles with Administrator Criswell of FEMA at the time that we received the weather briefing, 10 o'clock yesterday morning, which was the first time that we really received notice of a forecasted storm that could be a hurricane when it hit Louisiana, and we were able to start our coordinations and communications at that time. Earlier today I was with Health and Human Services Secretary Becerra in New Orleans as well, and able to thank him for his disaster medical assistance teams and all of the assets that they had previously sent to Louisiana with respect to the COVID emergency that are going to be much more important now, that they're going to continue to work in their capacity as COVID, but as this storm develops. And then there are additional HHS resources that are being brought to bear right now as it relates to the storm. So I had an opportunity to coordinate with him as well. At this time, I'm going to ask Ben of the National Weather Service to come up and give us all the latest on what is a very serious storm. And then I will come back up and give some additional remarks after that, and we will take questions as well. Ben? Oh, there you are.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon, everyone. Hurricane Ida has quickly developed into a hurricane way ahead of schedule, just like the Governor had mentioned. Right now, all forecasts tend to look at that it will be a pretty strong Category 4 when it makes landfall on the coast of Louisiana sometime on Sunday afternoon or evening. At that time, it's possible that we could have sustained winds getting close to 140 miles per hour with wind gusts close to or in excess of 170 miles per hour. This is stronger than Laura from last year. This will be a life-altering storm for those who aren't prepared and ready to take what Ida is going to throw at us later this weekend. As you can see on the track here, it's going to be crossing across a pristine environmental conditions for a hurricane to continue to develop, if not rapidly develop, which is why we're pretty confident about the Category 4 forecast moving forward for landfall on Sunday. As the Governor mentioned, it looks to hit somewhere there close to the central portion of the coastline and then work its way into the central portion of the state. This is where I think we can remember a little bit about also what Laura did, because I think we'll see some similar conditions here, where when you have a storm moving at around 15 or so miles per hour directly into the center of the state, you are going to have a significant large path of wind damage, trees down, power outages, and concerns from that wind over 100 miles per hour working way inland. And I'll show some graphics to give the exact extent of that kind of push of the wind later on. There are multiple other threats with this storm. A lot of folks will focus on the category, and they should in this case with it being a Category 4. It does have, obviously a significant wind threat, but there are other significant threats that are life-threatening as well, and I'll kind of work my way through some of those through the rest of the briefing here. As the Governor mentioned, this is the earliest time that we expect to see the beginning of conditions starting to deteriorate. If you notice on the graphic there, it shows it being somewhere late Saturday night into early Sunday morning, spreading into the state. The color part of the graphic there is the percentage that we will see tropical storm force winds. As you can see, almost all of southern and southeastern Louisiana are in excess of 70 or 80% chance for tropical storm winds at least. So this is definitely something for everyone to prepare for. I show this graphic here also to try to remove the I'm only interested in the center line part of the discussion. Again, the impacts on these storms can happen way away from the center and from the eye of this storm. And everyone must understand that and make sure you're prepared for what those impacts may be depending on where you are compared to the center line movement of the storm. Unfortunately, with the time of the new graphics just coming out, I have this just clipped, unfortunately, for southeast Louisiana, but there are hurricane warnings across almost all of southern Louisiana, and you can see some tropical storm just outside the state in Mississippi. The hurricane warnings do extend along the coast just a little bit further to the west, so I apologize for the graphic not showing it there. But it is time for people to start taking action. We are within just that last 24 to 36 hours at most before we're going to see tropical storm force winds taking over most of southern and southeastern Louisiana. When I was talking earlier about the wind threat and how far inland that it can push, everywhere in the purple is what we consider a potential for 110 mile per hour winds. So I want everybody to kind of get a feel for how far inland. That takes us all the way in to southwest Mississippi. So with the speed of the storm coming in and its strength being a fairly strong Category 4, it is possible that we could have winds in excess of 100 miles per hour push all the way from the coast all the way into Mississippi and portions of central Louisiana. And that is something that everybody, including Baton Rouge, Lafayette, you need to be prepared for that possibility this weekend. As you move a little bit further to the east, North Shore area of the New Orleans area there, Covington, Mandeville, Slidell, it's still possible you could see winds gusting from 74 up to over 100 miles per hour. Again, you do not have to be near the center of this storm to have significant impacts. Winds of 100 miles per hour will do significant damage to both trees and possibly the power grid for exposed lines. So for those who are in those areas, I would definitely consider in this time left to make sure that you have consideration for what you would do if you were without power as we move later on in the weekend. Surge is another devastating threat. It's probably one of the number one killers when it comes to hurricanes and straw hurricanes. So across most of the southern and the southeastern portions of the coastline, we're talking about extreme surge. 10 to 15 feet surge possible from the mouth of Mississippi west to about Morgan City. From Morgan City to Intercoastal City, just a little bit less of that, roughly around 6 to 9, and then 3 to 5 to the Texas line. As you go the other way and you work your way from the eastern portion of the mouth and wrap around the boot up towards the tidal lakes, you can see 7 to 11 on the boot portion of the Louisiana coast, and then in the tidal lakes 4 to 7. So again, the extent of the impacts are going to be far away from where this makes landfall. So for anyone with coastal interests, understand that you will see a significant amount of water move in. And depending on how large the wind field grows to and the movement and speed, these numbers may increase as we move a little bit closer to the storm making landfall. So that is definitely something for folks to watch, because higher amounts like that obviously will bring a much larger amount of risk, especially possible in the tidal lakes area where there may not be a full levee system for everybody to be protected. Rainfall is another huge issue with this storm. We're talking 10 to 15 inches of rainfall over a large portion of southeastern Louisiana. There may be pockets of 15 to 20 plus, depending on the speed and location of these bands setting up. With the rainfall that we're expecting today, that happened already today, and tomorrow, on top of the effects from Ida itself, there could be significant inland river flooding. And so with that, everywhere that you see the purple there across southeast Louisiana is where we're looking for the possibility of extreme flooding to occur. This is right on the edge of the city of New Orleans, so obviously we could have some water problems there, and that'll be something we'll have to consider as well as things set up. But I just want to highlight again that it's not just the wind threat here that could do most of the devastation. It's the water threat that's usually one that ends up being the biggest killer. And unfortunately, a lot of people tend to try to move around when they start to get worried or scared as the storm starts to come in, and this is probably the worst time to move, especially with this coming in on Sunday evening, Sunday night. As you go in the nighttime, you do not want to be trying to drive around when we're seeing heavy rains that could be creating all sorts of river or flooding that could cause your car to go off the road and into water, and then unfortunately put you at severe risk for loss of life. So just a quick overview of the threats here. The confidence is fairly high on the track. The track really hasn't budged for the last day or two. We are becoming more and more certain when it comes to the intensity. That Cat 4 at landfall looks pretty much like it's a really solid forecast now. And with that, all the threats of a very large storm with a little bit larger wind field are in play with the surge and the heavy rainfall. The one other thing that I did not mention is the possibility of tornadoes as well. And so as this comes on shore, especially on the eastern side of the shore, which will encompass much of southeast Louisiana and portions of coastal Mississippi and southwest Mississippi, they'll be under the gun for possible tornadic spin-ups, which is very normal for landfalling hurricanes. So there are multiple threats. There are multiple things for people to be watching and keeping their eye on and making sure that they're prepared for. Because, again, I'll start off with the same comment that I started with, I believe, unfortunately, this is going to be a life-altering storm for many people. And so the actions that you do now are what can prepare you to make sure that you can successfully navigate what Ida is going to throw at us. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And I don't know about you, but that's a very sobering assessment of what we can expect with Hurricane Ida. And I guess the biggest challenge is not just the strength of the storm, but how quickly it is approaching after its initial formation. And we don't have the normal time that we typically have in order to prepare for a hurricane of this magnitude, and that's why it's important that everybody take advantage of every minute that you have. We have announced that state offices in 38 parishes will be closed on Saturday, August the 28th through Monday, August the 30th. And we may be announcing additional closures on Sunday, but we know these will be closed Saturday through Monday. And I'm going to go through those for just a minute. Acadia, Allen, Ascension, Assumption, Avoyelles, Beauregard, Calcasieu, Cameron, East Baton Rouge, East Feliciana, Evangeline, Iberia, Iberville, Jefferson Davis, Jefferson, Lafayette, Lafourche, Livingston, Orleans, Plaquemines, Point Capee, Rapides, St. Bernard, St. Charles, St. Helena, St. James, St. John the Baptist, St. Landry, St. Martin, St. Mary, St. Tammany, Tangipahoa, Terrebonne, Vermilion, Vernon, Washington, West Baton Rouge, and West Feliciana. I want to remind everyone, please do not drive once conditions deteriorate. That's why it's important that you do everything possible in advance and get to the place where you want to ride out the storm. If for some reason you absolutely have to get on the road, make sure that you are mindful of debris, downed power lines, and flooded roadways. Do not drive around DOTD barricades. And if you see standing water, please turn around. Don't drown. I encourage you to use 511la.org or the 511LA app to see what state routes are open or closed because of the weather or other causes. And if necessary, find alternate routes before you actually get underway. DOTD also partners with Google Maps and Waze, which are also travel resources that are especially beneficial in times like these. The CPRA is tracking 692 gates across the coastal zone. As of earlier today, a total of 182 of those are closed. We are anticipating the full closure of major floodgates in the hurricane risk reduction system around the greater New Orleans area, the Morganza to the Gulf, and the Larose to Golden Meadow. We're aware of voluntary and/or mandatory evacuations in 5 parishes. These orders differ depending upon where you live in the parish. So if you live in Jefferson, Lafourche, Orleans, Plaquemines, or Tangipahoa, please refer to your local officials for instructions on evacuations. And whoever you are, and wherever you live or wherever you happen to be, make sure you're paying close attention to your local officials, especially the offices of emergency preparedness and parish presidents and so forth, and follow their guidance. Currently, the Louisiana National Guard has over 1,600 guardsmen on duty preparing for this hurricane, but also doing all of their normal COVID operations as well. I've authorized General Waddell to activate the entirety of the Louisiana National Guard. There will be more than 5,000 soldiers available to respond. Search and rescue assets are currently staged in 13 parishes. We do have 64 high water vehicles, 60 boats, and 13 helicopters ready to support and assist the citizens of Louisiana. The Department of Transportation and Development, led by Secretary Sean Wilson and his team, they've mobilized their high water signs and barricades and other equipment that may be needed to address issues related to the storm. This equipment will be utilized when it is appropriate to do so. Through an existing contract, DOTD currently has more than 70 coach buses and 20 paratransit smaller buses in Louisiana. They are staged at 2 vehicle staging areas, one in the New Orleans area, one in the Lafayette area. By tomorrow morning, we will have a total of 125 buses staged in Louisiana. The majority will be at the New Orleans vehicle staging area. This afternoon, just a little while ago, I did direct that the Saints preseason game with the Cardinals be canceled. Now that we've had update on the weather forecast and the severity of the storm is increasing, and knowing how valuable every minute is for people to be preparing for this storm, I did not believe it was appropriate for there to be an NFL preseason game taking place on Saturday afternoon, knowing that we're asking people by dark tomorrow night or bedtime tomorrow night, however you want to say it, that they be postured and located wherever they need to be and how they need to be to ride out the storm. It's never too early to start talking about post-storm safety as well. And I will remind you that in Hurricane Laura, we actually lost more people after the storm than we did during the storm to things like generator safety because of carbon monoxide poisoning, to people who were using chainsaws and on roofs and that sort of thing, and heat related issues as well. So everyone, please be mindful of this, and there is a very good likelihood that for some period of time, a considerable part of our state will be without power. Not that we're not doing everything we can to make sure that we can respond quickly. I can tell you there are already 5,000 linemen in the state ready to respond, and almost 12,000 more postured to come in when they're called. But there's going to be a period of time, if the past is any indication at least, where many Louisianans will be without power. Many of those will rely on generators well away from your home, at least 20 feet, and certainly not indoors or in a garage. Fuel the generator, let it cool off for at least 20 minutes. Do that. Finally, the fact that we're still in a pandemic makes this prepare for and respond to. The pandemic isn't going to leave just because, and so we just have to deal with it. I'm going to ask Dr. Cantor to briefly go over today's numbers as well as we have one of the concerns that I tens or hundreds of thousands of people moving around when our percent positivity, although it's well above 10% out there, and transmission remains too. And if anybody has this week, you'll see that we've had some of the highest numbers of the pandemic. And through some of the COVID-related information, a few additional comments, and then we'll.
Governor, this is a powerful and dangerous, moving a little bit faster than we have, a little bit less time to prepare. Your normal timeline of preparedness now, so take stock, make use of the time to prepare, as the governor just. Thankful that our COVID numbers have softened last week in this really unprecedented fourth surge. Reported out an additional 3,428. That's on 37,520 tests. And 684 COVID patients. That number is down just over last week. We were at a place a week ago not take anymore. So we are thankful. As the governor said, the transmission out there, your risk, your chances of being exposed to and infected with COVID remain higher today than they have been at any point in the pandemic leading up to the beginning of this fourth surge. Percent positivity has gone down a couple points from our peak, but now it's at 14.1, which is still very, very high. There's a lot of COVID out there. There's a lot of risk out there. And as folks think through what their hurricane plans will look like and their contingencies, they need to take stock of how to keep themselves and their family safe from COVID. In most circumstances, that's going to mean limiting themselves to their family unit as much as possible, and when not possible, masking and distancing. This has been a difficult week. We reported earlier in the week our single highest fatality count from COVID to date at 139 deaths. We also unfortunately reported out 2 pediatric COVID deaths this week, one of which was in an infant less than 1 year old. There's still a lot of risk out there. This storm is not the only risk out there. COVID increases the risk. Please take stock of that. Please incorporate that into your hurricane plans. Again, if you need to be in an environment where you're mingling with people beyond your family unit, the things that will keep you safe from a COVID perspective are masking and distancing. Please keep that in mind. I would also like to ask people, although our hospitalization census from COVID has gone down a little bit, it still is higher than it was in any of our 3 prior surges. The hospitals are still in their own contingency plan, postponing elective procedures, departments, unless you need it. If you're sick, by all means, go to an ER. It doesn't warrant an emergency department storm, because we're trying our best to for what they have on their hands now throughout the storm. Special medical needs, including dependency, do what you need to do. Make sure you have your supplies prepared. If you need assistance with any of know where to go, start with 211. Points throughout the state. 211 will have the most up-to-date listing. If you need assistance, supplies that you and your family require, 211 is the first place to go for that. The majority of the COVID state are ramping down right now, closed, and the remainder will close. So please keep up with those. Be much activity of that throughout the weekend. Of COVID vaccine and you were scheduled to get, it's likely that will not happen. You should reschedule possible after this storm rolls. I'd like people to get their second doses on the close to 21 days after the first for Moderna, but if that's not later, it's okay to do it 1 week later. Remember to do it later. So if you have to appointment because of the storm, get that official to you. Deaths during hurricanes, and we want to do all we can to storm. Some deaths are not going to be preventable. During a storm, death is from motor vehicle high water. Last year's storm season, we had 42 deaths, accidents in high water, and during the flood, 4 or 5 deaths were from people driving. If you don't need to be on the road during the storm, now to enable you, once the winds get above a certain, not coming for you. Fire are staying put after the winds get above a certain speed, which means if you get into an accident, you're by yourself until the wind slows down. And if you get into an accident involving water, they might not be able to get to you at all. So please don't put yourself or your family or our first responders in harm's way. If you don't absolutely need to be on the roadway during a storm, don't. Stay home. Once the storm passes, as the governor mentioned, there are a couple other ways that we see preventable deaths every single storm, every single season. Number one is from unsafe generator use and poisoning by carbon monoxide. During last storm season, we had 9 deaths from unsafe generator usage. Carbon monoxide is, you don't know it's there until, if you do need a generator outside, it always must be kept well away in the garage. Don't keep it in your house. Don't keep it just below an open window or an open stove to heat your house. The other preventable death that we see every storm season is heat exhaustion. During last storm season, we had another 9 people die from heat exhaustion. So if you have to do work on your house after the storm rolls through, try and avoid the peak of the day. Stay hydrated and don't push yourself. It's not worth it. I have to remind folks again, this is a fast-moving storm, which means you have less time than normal to get yourself and your family prepared. If you're going to be evacuating and you're going to be around people beyond your immediate household, please mask and please distance. It's not worth putting your family in jeopardy of getting COVID because of this evacuation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cantor. While we're talking about COVID, I'm going to go ahead and address the public health emergency that you all know is set to expire next week. And we have started to see some improvement in our data. that literally started exactly 2 weeks after the current mask mandate was put into place in terms of reducing percent positivity of our tests, cases, hospitalizations, which have improved by a total of these improvements. We are still much worse off than we ever were in our first 3 surges, and none of the gains that we have, and that is especially true since 100 Louisiana today are attributable to the Delta variant, which is much more transmissible and potentially more virulent as well. And so with all that we're going to be dealing with next week, and because we are preparing for and responding to a major storm during COVID, and we have every potential to lose whatever momentum we've been able to get that I just mentioned, I can go ahead and announce today that our will maintain the indoor mask for those vaccinated and unvaccinated, the exact same mandate that we currently have. We know that these mitigation measures, the vaccines are safe, and to do those things that are required can preserve as possible to deliver the hurricane again. Remember, lots of people, lots of boats and rescue. Just as soon as everyone 3 days worth of supplies on hand. The first and travel of the hurricane to make sure 2 hours. A difficult spot. Sooner than that, you know that we will. One in difficulty. Can't count on that so remember the first and in the immediate after control as best as possible. That means wear your mask, wash your hands, and so forth. Time to prepare, not as much as we would like. Key, panicking is the exact right now. If you haven't, get a gameplan.org and you be focused on between now tomorrow night. Weather and your local officials, please keep your phones charged. Sign up for updates from my office. You can text IDA 83. Before that doesn't make it easier. That this storm is going to be just like any other, but this one has the potential to be very serious, potentially catastrophic. So let's prepare. Let's neighbors to one another next door or across the street. Your grandparents tomorrow to get in a better hurricane. And with that, we direct questions to myself, to or to any of these public. Yes, sir. Yep. Where evacuations signatory, those individuals